The two remaining manners of articulation, the liquids and the glides, are both sonorant consonants, and together they make up the category of sounds known as the approximant consonants. Compared to the other consonant manners of articulation, the approximant consonants are more vowel-like in the way they are produced and in the way they sound. The approximant consonants are produced with less obstruction in the vocal tract than for the other consonant manners of articulation. Furthermore, like the vowels, the approximant consonants are voiced, and the quality of the sound comes from the modification of the voice source by the resonances of the vocal tract. Along with the nasals, the liquid consonants can sometimes also be syllabic, forming the vowel nucleus. The consonant, like the first sound in red, is categorized as a voiced palatal liquid consonant, also called the rhotic consonant. Articulation of this phoneme is quite complex, and it is typically the last sound whose correct pronunciation is acquired by children learning English as their first language. There are two different ways that speakers commonly produce the R consonant. Both involve forming a constriction in the oral cavity near the hard palate. A constriction between the tongue root and the posterior pharyngeal wall is also essential for correct pronunciation of this sound. Most talkers also round their lips when producing the R consonant. The palatal constriction for the R consonant can be made either by bunching up the tongue body so that the tongue tip is near the bottom teeth and the body of the tongue is close to the hard palate, or by curling the tongue tip up and back near the palate. The first version is called the bunched tongue version of R, and the second is called the retroflex version. In either case, the tongue does not actually touch the hard palate. You can produce the R consonant correctly with either method. Pause the recording and try and see which version you make by elongating the first sound in rug. Rug. The other liquid sound in English is the voiced alveolar liquid, the first sound in leg. It's also called a lateral consonant. To create this consonant, the tip or blade of the tongue touches the alveolar ridge, just like for the alveolar stop consonants. However, the sides of the tongue are not raised for the ul sound, so air is allowed to flow freely around the sides of the obstruction. Sometimes, when an alveolar stop precedes the L sound, the alveolar constriction is not released. Instead, the stop is released by simply lowering the sides of the tongue. This is called a lateral release of the stop. You might hear it in words such as huddling or cuddling, depending on how you say them. If you say these words without the lateral release, they might be 3-syllable words, but 2-syllable words if you say them with the lateral release. Listen, huddling with the lateral release versus huddling without it. Listen again, huddling versus huddling. On the mid-sagittal section, notice that for the R consonant, the tongue body approaches the palate, but is not as close as for the palatal fricatives. Furthermore, the lips are shown as rounded, and the velum is raised. The mid-sagittal section figure for the L consonant looks exactly the same as the mid-sagittal section for the D consonant, because contact is made between the tongue and the alveolar ridge, and both are voiced. You can't see the lowering of the sides of the tongue for the L consonant on the mid-sagittal section figure. Therefore, you should not expect to see a test question with the figure on the right in the slide in which both L and D would be possible answers, because it's impossible to distinguish between these two phonemes from the mid-sagittal section. An allophone of the ul or L consonant that we will begin transcribing while we are doing broad transcription is the velarized or dark L. As mentioned earlier, when talking about the vowels, the dark L is the version of L that typically occurs in syllable codas at the end of the word or between a vowel and another consonant. For example, I would normally use the dark L at the end of the word fill, but not in the word filler or in the phrase fill it up. But I would use the dark L in the phrase fill my cup. The dark L doesn't occur in the onset of syllables in normal English pronunciation. The dark L is articulated differently from the normal or light L. Instead of an alveolar constriction, the dark L is made by forming the constriction with the back of the tongue raised toward the hard palate or the velum. The dark L is similar to the w glide in both its articulation and in the way it sounds. Listen as I say the word fill, first with the dark L, then with the light L. Fill versus fill. The dark L is also typically the one that is heard when L forms the nucleus of an unstressed syllable or makes a syllabic L, like you might hear in a word like bungle. The last manner of articulation for consonants that we will discuss is the glides. They are also known as semi-vowels and are the most vowel-like in their articulation. Glides only occur in syllable onsets or between two vowels, and they are distinguished by their brief duration and movement of the articulators during their production. In other words, they are called glides because the articulators glide from one position to another during their production. The voiced palatal glide, the first sound in the word yellow, is articulated very similarly to the vowel E, with a tongue constriction near the hard palate, except that the tongue constriction is slightly higher and you can't sustain the y sound. Let's try it. Say the word yard and try to lengthen the first phoneme. Yard. Do you hear how the consonant sound turns into the vowel E when you try to lengthen it? The voiced labial-velar glide, the first sound in the word white, is articulated with a constriction at the lips as well as a constriction between the back of the tongue body and the velum. Therefore, we say that the w consonant is doubly articulated. It is articulated similarly to the vowel oo, and when you try to elongate the first sound in the word woo, you should get something like the oo sound. Woo. Finally, note that because the glides are formed by movement from their places of articulation to the position for the following vowel, the difference in articulation and quality between a glide and the following vowel depends on the identity of the vowel. For example, in the word ye, the tongue body barely moves between the consonant and the vowel, but in the word yard, there is a great deal of movement of the articulators from the first consonant to the position for the vowel. In the same way, there is little movement of the articulators between the consonant and the vowel in the word woo, but a much greater degree of movement of the articulators between the consonant and the vowel in the word watch. Notice in the mid-sagittal section figures that the articulation of the y and the w consonants is very similar to those of the vowels e and oo, and both are voiced sonorant consonants. For the palatal glide y, as in yellow, the lips are not rounded, the velum is raised, and the tongue constriction is greatest near the hard palate, whereas for the labiovelar glide w, like in where, the lips are rounded, the velum is raised, and the tongue constriction is greatest between the back of the tongue and the velum. Pause the recording here and complete exercise 5.5 before continuing. Check the answers in the back of the book to make sure that you understand. Some speakers produce a voiceless version of the labiovelar glide in words that begin with WH. This is more common in speakers from southern states in the United States. Listen to the difference between the words which versus which. Which, voiceless W, versus which, voiced W. This voiceless pronunciation is an allophone of the labiovelar glide, and you don't have to transcribe it in broad transcription, but you might want to listen for it. If you'd like some more examples of glottal stops or a fun cartoon explaining glottal stops and flaps, click on the link shown in the slide in your notes. There are also lots more Geico Gecko commercials out there on YouTube. Now we have covered all of the consonants and vowels of English. You should be ready to transcribe words and short phrases. Let's try a few words now. In this exercise, your job is to transcribe my pronunciation of the words shown on the slide. You can stop the recording after each word and back it up to play it again. You'll probably need a few repetitions to transcribe the whole word. Here we go. Usage, jet airplane, ballpark, adjourn, computer, Weeden Island, bat cave. Pause the recording here and write down your answers. Here are the answers. If there are any differences between your transcription and the one shown on the answer key, listen to the examples again and see if you can tell where you made a mistake. Stop here and complete review exercises A through I before completing the homework assignment. Check your answers in the back of the book and make sure that you understand. This is the end of Module 4.